Well, hi, I am Pam Fox. Welcome back to my Bible study. So we're doing a verse by verse study through the book of Genesis, and we're getting towards the end. Um, we're in the life and the story of Joseph right now. So last time we left off um, in verse 43, and so just a little bit of summary. We have this story of Joseph. So remember when Joseph was a young boy, he was the youngest of his um, 10 brothers, and his brothers didn't like him. They hated him. Joseph was his father's favorite. He was kind of spoiled. And so they plotted to kill him. His brother, was it Simeon? No, Reuben, saved his life, convinced his brothers not to kill him, and instead they ended up selling him into slavery. He went down to Egypt, and through the course of the years, he ended up becoming Lord of the land, ruler over all of Egypt, no more powerful than any except for the Pharaoh, which would have been the king of the land. And so there was going to be 7 years of famine, or 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And Joseph knew this because God had spoken to the Pharaoh through his dreams. And so the Pharaoh put Joseph in charge to make sure that everybody didn't die. So for 7 years, they stored up a fifth of all the food. And then during the famine, back in the land of Canaan, where Joseph's family was from, they started running out of food, heard there was food in Egypt. So Jacob sent his 10 sons to Egypt to get food, and when they got there, Joseph saw them and said, "Oh, there's my brothers, the ones that sold me into slavery, the ones who treated me so poorly when I didn't deserve it." And so last week we saw he had sent them, he sold them food and sent them back home. But when they got partway back home, they found out that the money that they had used to buy the food was still in their grain sacks. So that made them kind of think, they were scared, because if they were to be caught, they could be killed for stealing from this lord of the land who was their brother, and they didn't even know it. And so they went back home to Canaan, and they were there for a while, and they wanted to go back because Joseph had taken their brother Simeon as kind of collateral, because he wanted them to come back and bring their other brother, their baby brother, Benjamin, which would have been Joseph's biological brother by his own mother. And so anyway, the brothers get back to Canaan, and they stay there for a while until the food starts to run out again, because their dad, Jacob, doesn't want them to take Benjamin back to Egypt. He wants to keep Benjamin there with him, because now Benjamin is the favorite. He kind of took over that spot when Joseph died. Jacob thinks Joseph is dead. He thinks he was killed by a wild animal. That light is too bright. When the food starts to dwindle again, the brothers are like, "We have to go back and get more food. We need to take Benjamin with us," because not Joseph, but this lord of the land said he wouldn't even see them if they didn't have their little brother Benjamin with them. So they finally talked Jacob into going back, and he doesn't like it, but he agrees. So they take Benjamin, and they go back, and they end up sitting down and dining with Joseph there in his house. And that's where it left off last week. At the very end there, they were all astonished because they'd been seated in their birth order, so they were kind of confused by that. And Benjamin received 5 times as much as his brothers. So the servants brought out the food for this feast. Remember, they were all divided into different groups. Joseph was all alone. The Egyptians were in a group, and then these Hebrew brothers, Benjamin's brothers, or Joseph's brothers, were seated all together, but they were seated in the order of their birth. And so it says they were astonished. They marveled at one another. And then the servants brought out the food, but Benjamin got 5 times as much food as his brothers. So it says they drank and they were merry with him. So we're going to go right into chapter 44. And if we have time, we'll do chapters 44 and 45 because, again, they're all it's all one story that just kind of is broken up into 2 chapters. So let's see how far we get. So, chapter 44. And he commanded the steward of his house, so this is Joseph, saying, and remember, we've seen this steward before. We saw him when Joseph commanded that all of his brothers be brought to his house. And when the brothers got to Joseph's house, they started pleading with the steward of the house. So this would have been, the steward of the house is the person that's being given control over his entire household when he's not there. He's the man in charge. So now they've just had this meal, they drank, and they're merry, and now Joseph is commanding the steward of his house, saying, fill the men's sacks with food as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in his sack's mouth. We saw the same thing last time. They got halfway back home, they stopped to feed their animals, and noticed that the money that they used to buy the food was there in the sacks. And they couldn't figure out why, but later the steward told them why. He basically said, I did it. We saw that last time. He said, I had your money. So now the same steward, Joseph is telling him basically to do it again. Fill up their grain sacks, put their money back in their sacks, and send them on their way. Verse 2, he says, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the sack's mouth of the youngest, and his corn money. And he did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. So this steward is going to put all the money back in their sacks, and he's going to put Joseph's cup, Joseph's silver cups. It's not like today where there's a cupboard with a bunch of glasses. Everyone had their own cup. The king had his cup. And Joseph is telling the steward to put my cup into Joseph's bag. Okay. Verse 3. And as soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away, they and their asses. So they didn't pack their own bags, the steward did. And now they're up and they're leaving. And when they were gone out of the city and not yet far off, Joseph said unto his steward, up, follow after the men. And when thou dost overtake them, say unto them, wherefore have ye rewarded evil for good? So he wants the steward and some guards to go after them after they've left, to catch up with them, to overtake them, and basically say, the Lord of the land was so good to you. Why are you repaying him with evil? And of course, they're going to be like, what? What have we done now? What's going on now? We thought everything was good. We just ate with the king and everything's good. And now they're going to catch up with them and accuse them of repaying him with evil. Verse 5. He goes on to say, Is not this it in which my Lord drinketh, and whereby indeed he divineth? Ye have done evil in so doing. So he continues on. He's basically telling his steward to accuse them of stealing the cup. That's what they're talking about here. The cup in which my Lord drinketh, whereby indeed he divineth. Now this is interesting. People of God in the Bible, and of course the Bible hasn't been written yet at this point for these people, but they're instructed by God that divining is something from the dark side, and it's not something we're to engage in. It's not something they are to engage in. Of course, Joseph now is an Egyptian. He lives among the Egyptians. He is Lord of the Egyptians. He is an Egyptian for the most part. So he would have taken on their customs. We don't know if he actually did divine, which is a way to, have a little ceremony over your cup and do some magic and see the future. We don't know that he did that, but this was commonality to have to divine and to have a divining cup, especially for the king. So they would have all understood what was being spoken about here. They would have understood what this cup, the significance of it, what it meant, and this accusation that they'd stolen it. So that's basically what Joseph commands his steward to do. Verse 6, and he overtook them and spake unto them these same words. Verse 7, and they said unto him, wherefore saith my Lord these words? God forbid that thy servants should do according to this thing. Behold, The money which we found in our sacks' mouths we brought again unto thee out of the land of Canaan. How then should we steal out of thy Lord's house silver or gold? With whomsoever of thy servants it be found, both let him die, and we also will be my Lord's bondmen. So the brothers have been accused of stealing the king's cup, and they're basically saying, it doesn't say who's speaking here, but the brothers are basically saying, we haven't done this horrible thing. We would never do such a horrible thing. Now, I do wonder what's really going on here. Joseph, remember, he was treated very poorly by his brothers many years ago. This was, I forgot the math. He was 17 at the time. Now I think he's 30. We're going to find out here in a minute that we're 2 years into the famine. So his brothers have had some time to grow up and mature a little bit and think about what they've done. But I think Joseph, he knows that he was innocent. He was mistreated. And maybe he wants to get a little bit of vengeance on his brothers. Remember, they treated him really poorly. He was very scared when they treated him poorly. They threw him into a pit and then they sold him into slavery. It was a very scary thing for him. And now he's doing something to his brothers to make them scared for the second time, only this time it involves Benjamin. The other thing I wonder too is that when we go through the story a little bit more, we see him basically saying, well, we'll talk about it when we get to it. But I do wonder about Joseph and his motives here. Is he just testing his brothers to see if they've really grown up, if they're really sorry about what they did? Or is he just getting back at them? Did God tell him to do this thing and we're not told about that? I mean, it doesn't really say. So anyway, verse 6, he overtook them, or we're past verse 6. Let's go down to verse 9. No, verse 10. So they say basically, if you find this silver cup amongst us, we will be your bondmen, which is a volunteer. A bondman is to volunteer to be somebody's slave. There's no transaction of money. There's no buying or selling. It's just a person volunteering to be somebody's slave. So they're basically saying, we will be your servants if you find the Lord's cup among us. Verse 10. And he said, now also let it be according unto your words. He with whom it is found shall be my servant, and ye shall be blameless. Then they speedily took down every man his sack to the ground, and opened every man his sack. And he searched and began at the eldest, and left at the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Verse 13. And they rent their clothes and laded every man his ass and returned to the city. That word rent means to tear, and this was custom when they would grieve. They would tear their clothes. It was an outward expression that you were going through a mourning process or a grieving process, or that you were really upset, which I find interesting. Okay, so they returned to the city, verse 14. And Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said unto them, and so it mentions Judah here. Remember, Judah was the one that promised his dad, I will be responsible for Benjamin. If anything happens to him, you can blame me for the rest of my life. And Judah said, let's see. So they fell before him on the ground, and Joseph said unto them, what deed is this that ye have done? Wot ye not that such a man as I can certainly divine? So again, there's this accusation that they've stolen the cup. And again, this would have made them very scared, because if he wanted to, he could have them killed for what they've done. They've stolen from the king, and they know it. So I feel like he's getting back at his brothers and making them feel scared, like they made him feel scared. That's just what I see here. I don't know what Joseph's motives were here, what his intentions were. We're going to see here in a minute. They're going to have a big reconciliation. So let's keep going. And Judah said, What shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also with whom the cup is found. And he said, God forbid that I should do so, but the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for you, get you up in peace unto your father. So Judah, the one who said he would take responsibility for Benjamin, is basically saying he wants Joseph to take all of the brothers to be his slaves and let Benjamin go. But Joseph's saying, no, Benjamin's the guilty one here. You guys go back home to your father, and Benjamin's going to stay with me. And again, I don't know if he would have known that would have really hurt his brothers and made them scared, because they're the ones that have to go back and tell their dad that they lost yet another brother. Or maybe Joseph wants to spend time with his brother. I mean, or maybe a little of both. Or maybe Joseph hasn't really fully thought this out, or maybe he has. I mean, he certainly had time. Okay, so verse 17. And he said, let's see, I already read that verse. So he tells them to go back to their father. Get up, go back to your father. Verse 18. Then Judah came near unto him and said, O my Lord, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word in my Lord's ears. He wants to have a private word with Joseph. And let not thine anger burn against thy servant, for thou art even as Pharaoh. So he's coming to him with a posture of humility, because you have to, when you go before, I mean, you even to be able to come before like someone at this high level and speak, you have to go with a certain degree of humility, because you could, if they wanted to, they could just have you, taken off to prison or whatever for even speaking to him. So he goes to him. He says, my Lord, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word into my Lord's ears, and let not thy anger burn against thy servant, for thou art even as Pharaoh. He's kind of buttering him up. My Lord asked his servants, saying, have ye a father? So now he's going to go through, he's going to recap this whole thing. My Lord, you asked his servants, saying, have ye a father or a brother? And we said unto my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age. Uh-oh, my computer froze. We'll wait a second and see what happens here. Okay. Give me just 1 second. Okay. We're back. Let's scroll down here. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so, and we said unto my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, and a little one, and his brother is dead. That would have been Joseph. And he alone is left of his mother, and his father loveth him. So he's talking about, my dad, we had a brother that died, but we have this little brother, Benjamin, and his mom and dad really love him. And of course, his biological mom died giving birth, but Jacob had 3 other wives, so they would have automatically taken care of this baby and raised it as their own. So he's basically saying this one, Jacob, is loved by his mother and father. And thou saidst unto thy servants, bring him down unto me, and that I may set mine eyes upon him. And we said unto my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. And thou said unto thy servants, except your youngest brother come down with you, ye shall see my face no more. And it came to pass, when we came up unto thy servant my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And our father said, go again and buy us a little food. And we said, we cannot go down if our youngest brother be with us, then we will go down, for we may not see the man's face except our youngest brother be with us. And thy servant my father said unto us, ye know that my wife bare me 2 sons, and the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn in pieces, and I saw him not since. So right there, that's giving Joseph is listening to Judah say all of these things. Judah is telling Joseph everything I'm reading right now. So that would have been confirmation for Joseph right there to know, okay, my dad has, that he was told that I was killed by a beast and I've been dead all these years. Because he had to have wondered, like, why hasn't anyone come looking for me? Why hasn't my dad come looking for me? Does he think I'm dead? So now he's getting this confirmation. Judah says, and the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn in pieces, and I saw him not since. And if ye take this also from me, and mischief befall him, ye shall bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. Remember, Jacob said, if Benjamin dies, it will kill me. So Judah's telling Joseph all these things. Now therefore, when I come to thy servant my father, and the lad be not with us, seeing that his life is bound up in the lad's life, it shall come to pass, when he seeth not the lad is not with us, that he will die. But thy servants shall bring down the gray hairs of thy servant our father with sorrow to the grave. So Judah's basically saying, if we don't take Benjamin back home, our dad is going to die, and it's going to be our fault. And I don't know if they would have really believed that. Like, did they really believe Jacob was going to die at the news that Benjamin didn't come back with them? I mean, maybe. I remember one time when I first got contacts, I was like in the 9th grade, and I lost a contact, and I came home crying, and it took my mom forever to get me to say what was wrong, because I thought she was going to kill me. Did I really think she was going to kill me? I don't know, maybe. Probably not. I just hadn't thought it out, thought it through. But anyway, Judah is telling Joseph basically, we can't go home without Benjamin. We just can't. Verse 33, now therefore I pray thee, let thy servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. So remember, Judah is responsible for Benjamin, and he's basically telling Joseph now, I will be your bondman. Let all my brothers go. I'll be your bondman, which is a volunteer slave. 34. For how shall I go up to my father, and the lad be not with me, lest peradventure I see the evil that shall come on my father. All right, let's go right into chapter 45. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. So Joseph is telling him all of these things. He says he couldn't refrain himself, and he cried, cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. So he orders everyone to leave. He's upset. He can't contain himself. He starts to cry. And everyone leaves. And then it says, Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. And it says, and he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. So he was weeping so loud that the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard him crying. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. So he makes himself known. He's like, I'm Joseph. And they're like speechless. He wants to know if his father is alive, and they're just standing there. They're speechless because it's starting to occur to them. It's coming all together. They were totally clueless, and now Joseph is saying, I'm your brother. And they're like, huh? So it says, they could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. So now they're coming near. So there would have been a certain amount of distance between Joseph and anyone that came into his presence. There would have been a protocol, right? He tells everyone to leave, and now he tells his brothers, come near me. So now they're like up. They can see his face. They can see his eyes. They can see his smile. And they're starting to get it. He says, and Joseph's very clear, I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. So now all of a sudden, Joseph has gone through all of these two different trials he put his brothers for. First, when they went home with the grain, and he sent them back with their money. Was he trying to punish them? Was he just trying to give them free food? I mean, I'm not really sure. Then he did it again. They went back home. Their money was in their bags, plus the king's cup. Um, so he puts them through all of this, and now he admits who he is. And he says, be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. So there's this degree of forgiveness that we're seeing here, that Joseph is not angry at his brothers. He's crying. I think he just is happy that his brothers are there, that they're together, and he wants them to know who he is. And, part of it, too, if you think about it, they were willing to plot to kill him. They threw him into a pit, and then they just listened to him scream and cry and beg for mercy and did nothing. And then they pulled him out and sold him into slavery and never came back looking for them, looking for him. Like, they didn't come back remorseful to change their minds and try to, find him or save him. So he had a right to be mad at his brothers, and yet now we see this picture of forgiveness where he's basically telling them, be not grieved, nor be angry with yourselves. So then he goes on to say, he says, for God did send me before you to preserve life. He goes on to say, for these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. So he's letting them know, there's still 5 more years of this famine. And remember, when Joseph was young and he would have these dreams, and when their dad gave him the coat of many colors and would send him out to watch over the brothers and bring back a report, they didn't care for any of that stuff. They didn't care for him being like the golden child of the family. They didn't like any of that stuff. And and so, excuse me. And so you have to wonder if Joseph, all of this time, now that his brothers have been back, if he's wondering, have my brothers matured? Have they grown up? If they realize I'm the king, remember he prophesied that they would bow before him. He's got to be wondering, are they going to be cool with that? Or are they going to hate me all over again? Because now I am the king. Now they are bowing before me. Now I do hold their very lives in my hands. Are they going to love me, or are they going to hate me all over again? And if they do seem to love me, is that love going to be real brotherly love? Or will it just be because I'm ruler of the land? So these things had to have gone through Joseph's mind. At least I would imagine they did. So I can kind of see why he's putting off revealing who he is to his brothers. But it feels to me like he couldn't hold back anymore. Like he just starts sobbing and crying so loud that the people outside could hear. And the brothers would have been like, dude, what's wrong? And so, he tells them who he is. So now he's telling them, we've had 2 years of famine, but there's 5 more. He says, and God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Wow. God sent Joseph to preserve. It says, God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth. And then that posterity means to survive. This is what it's all about. It's about God, in his own way, in his mysterious way. This is how he decided to do it. This is how he decided to save the bloodline of Christ. The origins of the Israelites. Now, of course, he could have done it a million different ways. He could have just made it so there was no famine. But this is the way God works, in mysterious ways. And so now you and I have this story of preservation, preserving life, and this story of great deliverance. He says, God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So if God had just, okay, there's not going to be a famine after all. Go on living about your lives. There wouldn't have been a great deliverance. And our God is the God of great deliverance. So to me, this is one of the original stories of great deliverance. And of course, the ultimate great deliverance will be fulfilled in Jesus Christ later. but this is an original story of God's great deliverance. Verse 8. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me lord over all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. So he says, haste ye and go up. So he's like, hurry, I want you to go back, and I want you to tell dad that I'm alive, and I want you to bring him. He says, come down unto me, tarry not. So I want you to hurry, go, bring my father back, and don't delay. He says, and thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, which was a town there in Egypt, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh. And so he's he's like, you can believe it. It's true. It's me. I'm Benjamin. Your eyes and your ears aren't failing you. It's me. And he wants them to go and get the whole household and bring them back to Egypt to live in the land of Goshen. He says, and ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that ye have seen, and ye shall haste and bring down my father hither. It almost sounds like he's kind of bragging a little bit there. Like, I want you to go back and tell my dad how amazing I have, all that I've done and all that I've become. I don't know. He says, and ye shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. This is a really sweet thing to imagine, this reunion between Joseph and Benjamin, although it is kind of a funny thing to me. I mean, technically they're all brothers. They all have the same father. Yes, they have different mothers. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it's simply a biological reason, Joseph has this sweet spot for Benjamin. He brought him 5 times the amount of food. Here he falls upon his neck and weeps, and Benjamin weeps on his neck. We don't see that happening with the other brothers. Maybe it did, but it's not mentioned. It says, moreover, he kissed all his brethren. Oh, okay, forgive me. Moreover, he kissed all his brethren and wept upon them. And after that, his brethren talked with him. Okay, so there are hugs and kisses all around. But we're going to see here in a minute this favoritism towards Benjamin. So he says, and they talked. So they have a chat. It says they talked with him. Verse 16, and the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come, and it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. Now, I don't know if Pharaoh knew all about, maybe at some point, maybe they were sitting and having coffee one day, and Joseph's like, oh yeah, I don't know if you knew this, but I was sold into slavery by my brothers when I was 17. It was really horrible, and I really miss my dad. And maybe he confided all of that to him. I mean, I don't know. But it says in the fame, which means this story, it got out, it said thereof, and was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come, and it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. So they were happy to hear that Joseph's brothers were here, and that there was this reconciliation. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, say unto thy brethren, this do ye, lade your beasts, and go get you unto the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and ye shall eat the fat of the land. Now thou art commanded, this do ye, take you wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Also, regard not your stuff, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. The Pharaoh is basically saying, I'm going to give you provisions, wagons, go bring your whole household back, and my home is your home. And he says, don't even bring your stuff. We'll replace it all. Verse 21, and the children of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh, and gave them provision for the way. To all of them he gave each man changes of raiment, would be a new robe, new clothes. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment. There we see that number 5 again. We saw it, he got 5 times as much food at that feast. He's getting 5 times the amount of clothes. And then the other time we see the number 5 in this story was when Joseph collects the food during the 7 years of famine. He collects 1/5 of the food. I don't know why I'm mentioning any of that. I don't know if there's meaning there, but I just noticed these little things pop out, this number 5 coming up. So he gets 5 changes of raiment. I'm sure it means something. I just don't know what it is. Maybe God will reveal it to us someday. And to his father he sent after this manner 10 asses laden with the good things of Egypt, and 10 she-asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. So they're sending food. So he sent his brethren away, and they departed. And he said unto them, see that ye fall not out by the way. And this fall not out is the word ragaz, and it just means to be afraid. He's basically telling them you don't have to be afraid, because the last 2 times they went back to Canaan, remember? And that's a long trip. At best, by my research, you could do the trip in 12 to 14 days in the best of circumstances. Commonly, it could take months to travel from Canaan to Egypt, with overnight stays or long, if there's any delays at all for any reason, it could take quite a bit of time. But the last 2 times they went back to Canaan, they found out that their money that they had used to buy this grain was still in their grain sacks. And of course, the last time, also the king's cup was in Benjamin's grain sack. So now Jacob is basically telling them, you don't have anything to be afraid of. I think he's basically telling them this is going to be a smooth trip back home with no surprises. 26. And he told him, saying, verse 25, and they went up out of Egypt and came into the land of Canaan and to Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. And I think he really fainted here, and we're going to see why I think that here in a minute. I think he actually fainted. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. Well, maybe he didn't actually faint. But he saw these Egyptian wagons. These, they would have been like chariots, or they would have had maybe decorations, like maybe gold on them, or who knows. But it would have been very obvious, like, oh, these are Egyptian chariots. Maybe they're telling the truth. So it says, the spirit of Jacob their father revived, and Israel said, that's Jacob, aka Israel, and Israel said, it is enough. Joseph my son is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. And that's it. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. All right. So yeah, we got through 2 chapters today. We just have 5 chapters to go till the end of Genesis. So God bless you guys. I hope you're all doing well. I pray that God is providing for your needs and that he is intervening on your behalf, keeping you from evil. I pray God's strength over you. I pray God gives you strength and courage. And I pray that, as always, he is the author and the finisher of your faith. And I pray that you're joining me in praying that prayer over others in your lives and in your circles, that God is the author and the finisher of our faiths. I just take that to mean this idea that is the author and the finisher of our faith. It means that any faith that we have is because of God. It means that to be the author of something, picture somebody sitting down and opening up the pages and starting to write this story, right? And it says he's the author and the finisher. So there's a beginning and there's an end. and this idea that God is the author of our faith. So, of course, God loves us and He wants us to have strong faith and to believe and to be good stewards. And so, this idea that God is the author and the finisher of our faith, I don't know, it gives me a lot of comfort to know that He's the author and finisher of my faith. And so it's a prayer I've been praying over my viewers, over people in my immediate circle, customers at work, and all of that kind of thing. So I would just ask you to join me in praying that prayer over people that you encounter throughout the day, and in your lives. And yeah. For today, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time. God bless you.